Hello, and welcome to Once Upon a Train. I'm your conductor, Michael Campbell. Today's Grand Circle Tour is all about the Lilly Belle, Walt Disney's own mighty little locomotive. This miniature steam engine was the jewel of the Carolwood Pacific Railroad. We'll go there in a future episode. Together, we will explore the Lilly Belle's origins, see how it was featured in magazines and studio projects, view the collectibles it's inspired, and see how it is now a highlight of the Walt Disney Family Museum. We've got a clean stack and clear track, so welcome aboard.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Once Upon a Train.
As you may know, Walt had a poor childhood. There was certainly no money for toys such as a train set when he was growing up on a small farm in Marceline, Missouri. Later, during the Great Depression, the same was true for many families, causing several toy manufacturers to go bankrupt. In 1935, the Lionel Company was at risk of failure when they negotiated a license to produce a wind-up Mickey Mouse handcar. Mickey's popularity propelled that product to such success that Lionel was able to pay back its creditors and avoid a very dismal fate. In appreciation, the Lionel Company would send Walt train sets over the years. In 1948, Walt set up one of these layouts in his outer office at the studio. Through this, he discovered that two of his key animators, Ollie Johnston and Ward Kimball, also loved trains. More importantly, they introduced him to miniature live steam railroading. Backyard railroads were gaining popularity in Southern California. Walt visited some at the homes of Dick Jackson, David Rose, Ollie Johnston, and others. This inspired Walt not only to build a live steam railroad, but to buy a new house to run it at. There's no one better suited to tell us what happened next than the man himself. Ladies and gentlemen, Walt Disney.
When the model train bug hit me, I decided my locomotive would be modeled after a Central Pacific locomotive that was built in Sacramento in the year 1872. Its old-time diamond stack intrigued me. It was built to a scale of 1.5 inches to the foot.
If you're going to build a live steam locomotive, it's helpful to own a motion picture studio. The Central Pacific 173 was a 440 engine, so named because it had 4 leading wheels, 4 drive wheels, and no additional wheels under the cab. Walt remarked that it was the most proportionate locomotive he had ever seen. As it happens, one of the machine shop employees, Eddie Sargent, was able to obtain the original blueprints for the CP-173. These served as the basis for his locomotive, which Walt named Lilly Belle in honor of his wife, Lillian Bounds Disney. The highest honor in railroading is to have a piece of equipment bear your name. Lillian Disney has been honored 3 times in this fashion. The miniature Carolwood Pacific locomotive, the full-size Lilly Belle locomotive of the Walt Disney World Railroad, and the Lilly Belle presidential coach of the Disneyland Railroad. That's quite an achievement for a lady who, by all accounts, didn't care much for trains. Together, Walt and the machine shop staff built the Lilly Belle and the rest of the Carolwood Pacific equipment. Walt personally crafted the headlamp, other fittings, and the beautiful wood cab. A key player in this project was future Disney legend Roger Broggie, an expert machinist and manager of the studio machine shop. No matter what Walt asked, from the multi-plane camera to Disneyland attractions, Roger would reply, "Can do, Walt," and then figure out how to do it. This positive attitude is reflected in his own window on Main Street, USA. The first time Walt operated the Lilly Belle was at a studio Christmas party on December 24th, 1949. Let's go back to Walt to learn what happened thereafter.
Many of the castings and fittings of the locomotive were machined in the studio machine shop and assembled there before delivery to the backyard layout. The locomotive and tender weigh about 500 pounds, and this amazing little boiler generates enough steam to haul about 2 tons. With the arrival of the locomotive, it made it easier to complete the laying of the track. It was a big help to haul ballast in the gondolas.
The Carolwood Pacific, and particularly the Lilly Belle, were featured in several hobbyist magazines of the era, and even in mainstream media such as Look magazine. Recognizing that other people might want their own version of the steam engine, Walt created the Walt Disney Miniature Locomotive Company. It sold castings, machine parts, and other items necessary to build a clone of the Lilly Belle. Some of these WDMLC castings, and at least one full duplicate engine, exist to this day. Justifiably proud of this miniature locomotive, Walt featured it in 1 Hour in Wonderland, his first foray into making television programs. It was then put into use again, this time at the studio, for the filming of Operation Wonderland. In it, Walt shows how animated movies are made by traveling from department to department riding behind the Lilly Belle. As some people learned about his backyard railroad, they'd show up at his house asking for rides. Walt would find strangers roaming around his property and realize that he had inadvertently created a liability. He had Roger Brogy take the Lilly Belle back to the studio so they wouldn't be tempted to run it, and stopped work on a second locomotive that would eventually become the Lilly Belle 2. As exhibited many times throughout his life, Walt didn't give up. He just found a better way. In this case, he was about to set his sights on a much larger railroad that would be built among the orange groves in Anaheim, California. The Lilly Belle was fired up once more in 1954 to entertain Kirk Douglas and his children. This became a point of contention as footage of this visit was shown on television without Kirk's permission. Back at the studio, Disney legend Bob Gurr shared his machine shop office space with the Lilly Belle. Walt would sometimes stop by to chat with Bob and possibly to visit with his locomotive. Bob recently shared with me that Walt also had an emotional attachment to that specific office. It was there that he and Herbie Ryman spent a 48-hour marathon session creating the first concept art of Disneyland. The October 1965 edition of Railroad magazine features an article written by Walt entitled, "I Have Always Loved Trains." At the end of that story, Walt mentions that he still has the Lilly Belle. "I'm going to get it repainted and displayed in a glass case at the Disneyland and Santa Fe station," he said. Although it was not repainted, the engine, tender, and Carolwood Pacific caboose sat in a custom display at the Main Street station for years, just as Walt wanted. It is at this point where my humble role in this story starts. I've been a railroader my whole life and always thought that the Lilly Belle was the most beautiful locomotive ever built. I wanted a model of it for my own and found that there had never been an operable commercial version made. A company named Visions and Scale made a static sculpture of the Lilly Belle for the 1997 Disneyana convention, but I hoped for something that could actually run. One of the key lessons I've learned from Walt's life is to be curious, keep exploring, and try new things. I imagined that I couldn't be the only one who would want having a little Lilly Belle, and maybe a model railroad company could produce it. Through my friend Michael Brogy, son of Roger Brogy and author of the excellent book Walt Disney's Railroad Story, I got to know Walt's daughter, Diane Disney Miller. After discussing the idea with Michael, I asked Diane if we could produce a garden gauge version of the Lilly Belle. She hated the idea. Diane didn't like the thought of her dad's personal interests being commercialized. What finally convinced her, I believe, was that the models of the Lilly Belle would help kids today understand, as they ran it around their Christmas trees or backyards, that Walt was a real person with a real life outside of the company that bears his name. After obtaining Diane's approval, I contacted several manufacturers to determine who might be interested in creating this model. Heartland Locomotive Works of LaPorte, Indiana, was willing and eager to make the investment in tooling to create a version. To keep my promise to make this project about Walt Disney the person, I designed the box for the HLW Lilly Belle and included details about Walt and his wife Lillian. Disneyland agreed to sell these models through the Disneyana shop on Main Street, USA, and it premiered in October 2000. Frankly, I was concerned that the product would flop, and Disneyland wouldn't be able to sell the 100 units that Heartland had made. So much so that I asked my friend Mike Lima to work with Pin USA to create a commemorative pin that we'd give out with those 100 units. We also included a display case and a section of the actual rail from Walt's Carolwood Pacific Railroad. My concerns quickly vanished when those first 100 units sold out in about an hour. Through Disneyland, Walt Disney World, and the Disney catalog, eventually 1,500 of these models would make their way into homes around the world. During the premiere, a guest mentioned the differences between the Heartland model and the actual Lilly Belle. I explained that creating a precise reproduction of the Lilly Belle was possible, but would cost well over $1,500. He responded, "Where do I write the check?" This led to my work with AccuCraft Trains, makers of museum-quality models. A highly accurate reproduction of the Lilly Belle was released in September 2001. You can see the differences among these G-gauge models alongside the Lilly Belle 2. Years later, Disney Imagineer Kim Irvine decided to place one of the AccuCraft models in the Frontierland bedroom of the Disneyland Dream Suite, now called 21 Royal. Over time, we would also work with Bachmann Trains to make an HO set, including the Lilly Belle, some Carolwood Pacific Railroad cars, a loop of track, and a power supply. These premiered at Disneyland and again quickly sold out. This was followed by Lowell Smith making an N-scale version that was offered through the Walt Disney Family Museum. AccuCraft went on to make a true live steam G-gauge Lilly Belle. I like to think that Walt might be pleased that his hobby inadvertently inspired others to explore the world of model railroading and particularly miniature live steam. Diane was pleased with the public's reaction to these Lilly Belle models. At the time, she was concerned that many people didn't understand that Walt was a real person, not a corporate symbol like Betty Crocker. In celebration of Walt's 100th birthday, she worked with the Ronald Reagan Presidential Museum to present an exhibition called Walt Disney, The Man and His Magic. The Lilly Belle was removed from its Disneyland display and replaced with the Lilly Belle 2, so that the original could be featured at the Reagan exhibition. Diane decided that the original Lilly Belle should return to the family after that show closed. So what is this Lilly Belle 2 I keep mentioning? It started out as a planned second locomotive for the Carolwood Pacific, but wasn't completed after Walt shut down his little railroad. The pieces that had been fabricated were preserved, and decades later, Roger Broggie Jr. would return to these. He helped make them as an apprentice machinist in the early 1950s. Roger and a team of Imagineers transformed these into a replica of the original Lilly Belle for display at Tokyo Disneyland. After that exhibit concluded, the Lilly Belle 2 was displayed at the headquarters of Retlaw Enterprises, the Disney family's private corporation. Retlaw is Walter, spelled backwards. Now that the original Lilly Belle was available, I suggested to Diane in 2002 that we could create an exhibition about Walt and trains at the California State Railroad Museum. She loved this idea, as did the CSRRM team, and the exhibition was made possible only through a generous donation from Diane and her husband, Ron Miller. Diane loaned the Lilly Belle and consist to the State Railroad Museum, along with some of Walt's effects. The California State Railroad Museum reported that while this exhibition, The Happiest Train on Earth, Walt Disney's Backyard Railroad, ran, they saw an increase of 400,000 visitors over the same period in the previous year. Just a few years later, we set up the Lilly Belle and her train at the Richard M. Nixon Presidential Museum as part of a Christmas train show. Again, the public came out in great numbers to see Walt's little train. The success of the Reagan, Nixon, and State Railroad Museum exhibitions encouraged Diane that the public was still interested in the personal history of her father. Initially, she thought to put out Dad's stuff in a small warehouse near the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco. Her idea kept growing and growing, until it became the spectacular Walt Disney Family Museum. Diane and her son, Walter Miller, hired me to serve as the railroad consultant for the WDFM's creation. This tremendous honor gave me a front row seat to see how a little private display evolved into a truly world-class museum. Here are some behind-the-scenes images and stories for you. Naturally, the Lilly Belle would be a highlight of this new museum. Sometime after Walt's passing in 1966, the locomotive had suffered some damage. A broken cab window, a bent fender, and a small rod had snapped. Worst of all, someone had put 4 mismatched screws through the wooden cab's hinged roof, splitting the fine woodwork that Walt personally created. The museum fortunately had Tanya Morris, an art restoration expert, on the team. She repaired the damage to the cab so well that it's impossible to tell where the wood was once split. To make sure there was no lingering rust, we used a borescope to look down through the smokestack and examine the smoke box for potential rust. Tanya even dusted the coal load. For mechanical repairs, I contacted Sean Batista of the Hillcrest shops in Reedley, California. Sean's Disney experience includes rebuilding 2 of the Disneyland Railroad's locomotives, as well as Ollie Johnston's Marie E. steam engine. Along the way, we discovered a few surprises about the Lilly Belle. The most notable was that the smokestack had broken off at some point and was put on backwards. We decided to leave that as it is because reinstalling it might create new damage. Once repaired, the Lilly Belle was carefully brought from the warehouse to the new museum. Looking like the world's coolest pull toy, it was rolled on a pallet through the galleries and past the stunning view of the Golden Gate. From there, it was hoisted up and over the walkway railing onto a cantilevered display. This created a very tense moment. A mistake here could have dropped the locomotive, the only one of Walt's many creations that he named after his wife, onto a concrete floor 18 feet below. Everyone finally exhaled when it was safely on the track. As we rolled the engine forward into place, it derailed. Thinking it a fluke, we again rolled it into place, and once again it derailed. The locomotive's wheels are precisely gauged to 7 1/4 inches. Using a tape measure, we found that the display track's gauge varied from 6.5 to over 8 inches. After some quick adjustments, we were able to place the Lilly Belle in the spot she occupies today. For publicity photographs, Walt would often put tiny American flags in the flag stands at the front of the locomotive. Even though the originals had long disappeared, I felt that we should honor Walt's tradition. Michael Aronson of Lost Boys Design and the editor of these Once Upon a Train videos created 2 perfectly sized 48-star flags on fabric. These were fixed to scale flagpoles crafted by Sean and placed on the engine by me. Today, the Lilly Belle and her train make a dramatic, energetic statement as guests enter Gallery 9. She appears to be proudly climbing a curved grade, looking every bit like the mighty little engine that could.
Welcome back. You can see the Lilly Belle in person at the Walt Disney Family Museum in San Francisco. If you haven't been there yet, you owe yourself a trip to this magical museum. Visit waltdisney.org for all the details. That concludes our trip through the creation and enduring appeal of Walt Disney's Lilly Belle. Until next time, happy rails.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this grand circle tour on Once Upon a Train. For your convenience, the like and subscribe buttons will remain open for at least 1 additional hour. Thank you.